When I was 13 years old, I played my first ever lead role of Pepper in the musical Annie. A year later, I would reprise my role of Pepper in the sequel to Annie called Annie Warbucks. And yes, there is a sequel to Annie. And at the beginning of that sequel, you find out that they gave all the orphans back that they adopted to the orphanage to then readopt them at the end of the sequel. Anyways, when I was 14, that was the first year I got my period, and I was having a really hard time adjusting to my PMS. So I was really cranky. And during Tech Week, I was mic'd up, and I remember walking off stage after a particularly difficult PMS day and ranting to my fellow castmate. And I remember saying, I can't deal with this right now. I'm on my period. And little did I know, the soundboard op did not turn off my mic. That was broadcasted to the entire theater. Hi, I'm Mia Zappacosta, and I'm an actor. And that's a true story, by the way. But welcome back. I got a camera, so if things look a little bit different, that's why. It was a birthday present from my mumsy. So thank you, Mum. By the time this is up, I will officially be 24 years old. Anyway, welcome to Mia Likes Movies. My name is Mia, and I do like movies. I like movies so much, I was actually going to do a movie review. Unfortunately, there is a writers and actors strike going on, and I didn't want to promote struck work. So, if there's one thing I like more than movies, it's people in my industry getting paid what they're worth. So today we're actually going to talk about the strike because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what's going on. And I think more people need to talk about it because it's not just people not wanting to work because they don't want to work. It's much more than that. And before we officially begin, I just want to say I am not an expert on this topic, okay? Don't use this as a source for your papers. Whenever you're watching this, don't use this as a way to determine what work to do and what not to do, what struck work and what not struck work. There are others much more versed in the legalities of this. And if you have any questions about any of that, reach out to the union directly. Additionally, this video is entirely pro-worker and pro-union. And if you have a problem with that, leave. You're a capitalist scum. If you're here to argue against workers' rights, you can go suck the thumb of the invisible hand somewhere else. This is not the channel or video for you. Okay, let's start with the major players of this strike, shall we? There's three big ones, and they all have really big acronyms. I'm going to look down at my notes so I don't get this wrong. The AMPTP, the WGA, and SAG-AFTRA. Those are the three. So let's start with the first one, the AMPTP. So AMPTP stands for Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. They are a trade association responsible for negotiation of all entertainment industry-wide contracts with the guilds and unions. If you're like me and you don't know what a trade association is because you went to school for theater and not business, let me help. Basically, a trade association is a bunch of people or companies or people representing companies that gather together to promote common interests and public relations in their specific line of commerce. So basically, the AMPTP is a big group of 300 or so producers associated with various studios, TV networks, and streaming services. And they meet together and they talk about how they can abuse their power and make more money. I mean, discuss how to further the entertainment industry. This group was actually founded all the way back in 1924. They were just the AMPP, which stood for the Association of Motion Picture Producers. So they really only dealt with movies. In 1964, they would merge with the Alliance of Television Film Producers, the ATFP. There are so many fucking acronyms. And then after this merge is when they officially renamed the group to what they're now known as the AMPTP. 2 years after, in 1966, they would merge with another group called the Society of Independent Producers. Some of the producers within the AMPTP represent some of the biggest companies in the world right now. Those being, and I'm going to read this list: Paramount Pictures, Universal Pictures, Walt Disney Studios, Warner Brothers, ABC, CBS, Fox, NBC, Netflix, Apple TV Plus, and Amazon, to name a few. These are rich ass motherfuckers. They could buy me. And this is important context to the strikes. I don't think people understand just how rich these people in the AMPTP are and how disconnected they are from the average worker. These are the richest people in the entire world. The CEO of Disney. You know how much money Disney makes a year? More than I will ever see in my entire lifetime. And you too, probably. So every few years, the major guilds at the AMPTP, such as WGA and SAG-AFTRA, meet with AMPTP to negotiate new basic contracts. These are known as MBA, or the minimum basic agreements. Basically, they negotiate and decide what is the least amount that both the unions and producers can agree to pay each member of the union. This has to do with wages, pension, and residuals most of the time. They negotiate other things as well, such as diversity, technology, ownership, and more. These negotiations for new MBAs are the catalyst for the current WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes. Before we dig into the specifics, I want to finish talking about the other two major players that I haven't talked about yet, but have mentioned. So the first of these two groups to go on strike was the WGA, or Writers Guild of America. They were founded in 1933, which was around the New Deal, Great Depression. There was a huge turnaround in labor and workers' rights in the United States. The WGA represents their members, screenwriters, during contract negotiations. They help to determine credits for films, TV, and digital mediums, so like a web series. They monitor, collect, and distribute residuals, which is basically the amount that they calculate based on how many people watch something after something has aired, and then they can get paid for it. It's usually not a lot of money. The WGA also registers scripts, and they do other things as well. There is a WGA West, technically the original WGA, and then there's a WGA East. The West is pretty much hosted in LA, whereas WGA East is hosted in New York, and the WGA East was actually founded in 1954, so it came a little after the original founding of what was the original WGA. But they are the same labor union, but they recognize that writers in different locations and in different mediums face different challenges. Typically, TV and film is centered around the LA area, whereas new media and TV are in New York, but this is not exclusive and things change, and also the cost of living is different on both sides of the US, so that's why there's two. But SAG-AFTRA is probably the union you're more familiar with, especially if you are into pop culture and award shows. The SAG Awards, for one example, which is what I referenced in the opening of this video, it's the award for actors by actors, aka members of SAG-AFTRA. Another acronym, SAG-AFTRA, is technically two labor unions in one. SAG stands for Screen Actors Guild, which represents actors in movies, and then AFTRA stands for American Federation of Television and Radio Artists and performers on television and radio. So these two unions were both separately founded in, again, 1930s, and eventually they would merge in 2012, which I thought they merged way earlier, but technically only about 11 years ago. And to quote the SAG-AFTRA website, SAG-AFTRA is the faces and voices that entertain and inform America and the world. So the union represents actors, announcers, broadcast journalists, dancers, DJs, news writers, news directors, program hosts, puppeteers, recording artists, singers, stunt performers, voiceover artists, and other media professionals. Over 160,000 people are members of this union, which means that over 160,000 people are currently on strike. So as I briefly mentioned before, every few years or so, AMPTP will meet with the WGA, SAG-AFTRA, and the other unions that they employ in the making of movies to negotiate updates to the MBAs. Earlier this year, the WGA and AMPTP did just that. Regarding what they were arguing for, the WGA has this to say, and I'm going to read it. Writers are facing the most comprehensive assault on compensation and working conditions that they have seen in a generation. The studios have taken advantage of the transition to streaming to underpay entertainment industry workers, including writers in every area of work. Like too many working people across our economy, as corporate profits grow, writers are just not keeping up. With the ever-growing streaming industry and just technology in general, it is important that these unions have negotiations regularly to keep the workers they represent safe with these working conditions that are constantly fluctuating because of these changes in technology. So the WGA asked AMPTP for higher residuals just in general. They also asked for better initial compensation and residuals for streaming features, weekly pay, rules to preserve the writer's room, so to make sure that they are hiring requiring the amount of writers necessary to produce good work, and as well as asking for added regulation regarding AI or artificial intelligence. I think it's important to note that the AMPTP completely just rejected the WGA's proposal regarding AI regulations. WGA asked that AI would not be allowed to write or rewrite literary material, that AI could not be used as a source material, and material covered under the WGA, so like scripts that the writers would register with them, cannot be used to train AI. AMPTP rejected this, and they countered with, and I quote from the breakdown that WGA posted, annual meetings to discuss advancements in technology, end quote. Ultimately, they would just hope that the writers would eventually just, change their minds and see that AI is not the bad guy, even though they would just steal their work and then not pay them. So ultimately, the WGA and AMPTP could not reach an agreement on any of the negotiations or asks. So thus, the WGA began their strike, and they did this on Tuesday, May 2nd of 2023. By the time this is posted, we're going on 15 weeks for the writer strike. So some of the rules that the members of the union have to follow during a strike are as follows. They can't write for struck companies. So struck companies would be companies that are a part of the AMPTP trade association, Disney, Netflix, etc. And this writing, which I found interesting, also includes writing for fiction podcasts and some animated features. You have to get approved from the union to write for an animated feature, technically, because some of them are struck work and some of them aren't. It's really strange. Members of the union can't deliver, submit, or sell scripts or literary work to struck companies. They can't negotiate with struck companies. They can't discuss future writing assignments, so they can't discuss what they would be doing after the strike. And there's other rules as well, but those are just some of the major ones that I noticed. And members also have to honor picket lines. They must strike and be on the picket lines, and they have to inform the guild of anyone who is scabbing. And if you don't know what scabbing is just a term that's used for people who break picket lines, work during a strike. I found two other rules from the WGA that were particularly interesting to me. One is that, quote, struck companies need to return or delete writer-owned spec, literary material, or sample scripts. And two, writers must preserve a digital date-stamped copy of all unproduced literary material for a struck company. So basically, the guild is asking that their members ask these companies to return or delete any of the writing that they may have submitted to them but not acted upon. They also ask that their members go through their work and digitally have a copy of all of them and then date them, so that if scabs or producers continue working on their work, they can see if it's used or altered by the date that is on the digital copy, and then they may pursue legal action. Not too soon after all of this, SAG-AFTRA entered their NBA negotiations with AMPTP. So SAG-AFTRA argued for an 11% general wage increase to keep up with inflation, qualified makeup artists for all hair texture, styles, and skin tones, relocation expenses to be covered when principal performers are employed away from home, and they also asked for compensation that reflects the value the performer brings to the streamers who profit from their labor, amongst other asks. SAG-AFTRA also discussed AI during their negotiations as well, so this was a common theme in all of the negotiations with the union. They argued that performers need protection of their images and performances to prevent replacement of human performances by AI. So basically what AMPTP wants to do is they want to hire background actors for about 3 to 4 hours, scan their likeness, put it in a massive, essentially Dropbox, say bye to those people, and then take that likeness, duplicate it a bunch of times with AI, legally own the likeness of that human, and then they can use that likeness as a digital background performance, basically, for any piece of media that they want to create. They want to own the likeness of people forever. And then they would only have to pay those background actors for that 3 hours. I did background work a couple of times. I did it on George and Tammy and a music video and some other things too. So when we did it for George and Tammy, right? And this is a little bit of a tangent. It was during the performance scene where George Jones is performing at the Opry. And that shit was so much fun. The energy that was in that room when Michael Shannon was performing as George Jones cannot be replicated by technology. Same thing when we did also for George and Tammy Wynette was performing what was her last concert, Jessica Chastain was singing live. And like, again, you can't replicate the energy of the people in the audience with technology, but that's what they want to do. They want to replace human beings with technology so they don't have to waste money on background actors, even though these are very talented people and people who make their living doing this. It's disgusting. Sorry, I went on a tangent there and that wasn't in my script. I think it's important. So what the AMPTP did eventually agree to, consultation processes to guard racist and sexist costume editions for stunt performers. So basically they don't put stunt performers in like blackface if they hire a white stunt performer for a black actor. And they also agree to access to reproductive health care and gender affirming care for performers working away from home in states that restrict medical access, which I think it's actually really nice that they agree to that, because that's actually not something that I thought they would agree to. So, you know, take the wins when we can, I guess. And regarding the 11% wage increase that I mentioned, AMPTP said no, but how about 5%? How about 5? I also want to note that regarding the ask for qualified hair and makeup artists for all performers, AMPTP did say yes, but only for principal actors, not for background actors. They don't give a fuck about background actors. Oh my God. Oh, it's so crazy. Like, between that and then the AI likeness situation, it is clear producers do not see the value of actors, and specifically background actors. There are a lot of people who make their living as background actors. So basically, SAG-AFTRA members cannot perform on screen, they can't do voiceover work, ADR, they can't submit auditions or self-tapes, they can't rehearse for struck work, and they can't do publicity for struck work. You may have noticed that some of your favorite celebrities are not doing red carpets, premieres, or interviews right now. That's because that would count as publicizing struck work, and they are honoring their union's picket lines. So, but SAG-AFTRA members can actually work on commercials, soap operas, variety shows, talk shows, not to promote struck work, game shows, music videos, broadcast news, audiobooks, and more. So if you're like, if everyone who's part of the union's on strike, why are news anchors still allowed to work? That's because this is not about their contracts. It's about specific other contracts, if that makes sense. If you're an actor or filmmaker, you can apply for an indie interim contract from SAG-AFTRA for your indie or student films. So they still want people to learn. Again, these are not the contracts that they're worried about. They're worried about the MBAs and the other contracts. The union has made it very clear that they're striking against these capitalist conglomerates and not the actual artists. That's basically it. Indie productions are not the enemy here. So SAG-AFTRA officially began their strike on Friday, July 14th. I also highly recommend checking out the websites of both the WGA East, WGA West, and SAG-AFTRA. Read through their demands and counters or refusals of the AMPTP. I went over some, but the sheer amount of refusals for the AMPTP was mind-boggling and honestly just straight up disrespectful. What can we expect in the next couple of months? Like, what the hell is going on in Hollywood, right? Well, you know, hopefully we can see an end to the strike, to AMPTP giving the unions what they want. However, this is probably not going to happen. While on CNBC's Squawk Box, the CEO of Disney, Bob Iger, and I don't give a shit if that's how he pronounces his name because he's a piece of shit. Regarding the writers and actors strikes, he said, there's a level of expectation that they have that is just not realistic. And they are adding to the set of challenges that this business is already facing that is, quite frankly, very disruptive. Oh, I'm sorry. Are the strikes disrupting your little vacation? Your little vacation in Florida or wherever the fuck you are? He also mentioned that the AMPTP came to an agreement with the Directors Guild of America, the DGA, and that they wanted to do the same thing with the writers and do the same thing with the actors. What Bob Iger fails to recognize is that the responsibilities and challenges that come with each of these positions as a director, writer, and actor are very different. The demands and pay of a director vary greatly from that of a writer and an actor, even varied greatly between a writer and an actor, not just a director versus a writer and an actor. All three are so different. You know, we joke about putting on our director cap and putting on our actor cap, but it's true. You have to use different parts of your brain in each of these roles. Bob is not writing scripts. Bob is not on set with the actors. He's not working with the actors. He's not an actor. He doesn't know what it takes to do these jobs. Bob is sitting in his cushy little office watching the zeros in his bank account grow. He's not doing objectives. He's not doing tactics. He's not on Google Docs writing a script. He doesn't give a fuck. He just wants money. Is there an end in sight for the strike? Probably not anytime soon, guys. I'm sorry to say it. Sources recently told Deadline that the AMPTP is not interested in going back into negotiations anytime soon. This source also said that the AMPTP plans to, quote, bleed out the WGA, allowing things to, quote, drag on until union members start losing apartments and losing their houses. The workers are striking and the producers are treating it like a military siege. These are people's lives. Like, they are hoping that these workers get so desperate that when they go back to negotiate, they will be so desperate that they will agree to essentially whatever in order to just start making money again, whatever the cost. What AMPTP doesn't realize is that this strike is about more than just the money. Contrary to popular belief, most writers and actors don't make a lot of money and they're not super famous. This strike is not for like the Matt Damons and Nicole Kidmans and Ryan Goslings and Margot Robbies. That's not who it's for, right? It's for the background actor that can't pay their rent. It's for the indie horror writer that is afraid to get sick or get hurt because they can't afford their doctor's bill. That's who the strike is for. Paying artists what they're worth. It's not allowing technology to steal human beings' work or the likeness of a human being in order to then replicate that poorly and cheaply. And those two words are not being used synonymously. It's about giving the actors and writers the recognition regarding the fact that they provide valuable skills and expertise to their work and to their industry that the audiences recognize. That's the big thing, especially for these big streaming companies. These actors and writers are bringing in so much money because of the way streaming has revolutionized the way we watch things. So much money is coming in, and the people who actually make the things that we're watching are not seeing that money in return for the work that they put into it. The producers are seeing that money, but not the people who were on set and doing the work. And that's not right. You know, if you are able, please donate to the writers and actors that are striking. And I will link that in the description below. It goes towards their housing, food, healthcare, etc., so that they can feel comfortable and safe during this strike. The last thing I kind of want to talk about is reality TV ? I've seen a lot online that there's this huge misconception that the writers and actors strike could lead to a rise in reality TV. Back in 1988, the WGA also went on strike against the AMPTP. This strike actually lasted 153 days and is still the longest strike in the history of the Writers Guild of America. Many people assume that this strike is what led to the boom of reality TV a decade later in the 90s and 2000s, but that's not true at all, actually. While it's true that reality TV is typically cheaper to produce just because they don't have to pay a writer to do it, a writer from the WGA, I should say. Essentially, producers end up acting as writers while they craft storylines, basically, since it's unscripted. But in 1988, the writer strike actually led to significant shrinkage in TV audiences. Like, people just weren't watching TV as much. So we didn't see a boom in reality TV. We actually saw an insane drop in TV viewership. So there's not a correlation there at all. The only reality TV that we kind of saw as a direct result of the strike in 1988 is Cops, which premiered in 1989, which actually ended up being one of the longest running TV shows in America. So the writers also went on strike towards the end of 2007 and into 2008. During the negotiations prior to that strike, the WGA attempted to have the NBA apply to cover reality TV. However, in the long run, they would end up conceding this concern about reality TV to the AMPTP negotiations in order to have better leverage regarding their other concerns. Some of the shows that came about or came to America during and after the 2007-2008 writer strike include Paradise Hotel, Big Brother, and Celebrity Apprentice, actually. But if you really look at it, the lasting impact of those shows, except maybe Big Brother, is not as large or significant as that of Cops. So you can't really argue that that particular strike led to a boom in reality TV either. All of that being said, The actors were not also on strike during the 1988 and 2007-2008 strike. This is the first time since 1960 that both the WGA and SAG-AFTRA have been on strike at the same time. And this is the first time that they're both on strike since the boom of reality TV in the 90s and 2000s. You know, perhaps people are right to theorize that we may see a rise in reality TV as the result of this strike. There's not really proof of it from the others, but it could happen. You know, we've seen TikTok and just social media in general really eat up shows like Vanderpump Rules and RuPaul's Drag Race and The Bachelor, etc., 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 right? Memeage and virality of a lot of the moments just lend really well to the quickness in which social media moves. So it's kind of like a recipe for disaster in that sense. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. That is what is going on in Hollywood right now. A very condensed summary. Like I said, don't use this video for legal advice. Please, if you have any questions, contact your union representative. But I hope this video kind of shed a light on what's going on right now and showed a perspective from someone who is in that industry, the effect it can have, and how genuinely serious this is. You know, hopefully if you didn't understand before, you can understand now the importance of what these strikes are fighting for, who they're fighting for, and how artists deserve to be respected for their work and paid for their work. Because if you've ever watched a TV show, then you should be in support of the strikes, right? Because you've benefited from our work. If you've ever watched a movie, you should be in support of these strikes because you've benefited from our work, right? Can you imagine a world where you couldn't watch Trolls 2? Because I couldn't. I would rather die than live in a world without Trolls 2. I mean that with my entire chest. Okay. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I realized that I did not tell you to subscribe or like, so if you made it this far in the video, please subscribe, caress the subscribe button, press like, bell icon, la 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 la, follow me, la 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 la. All my sources are going to be in the description below. Links to donate, links to read up about the strike, links to the articles I referenced, etc., etc. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you in the next video and support a local artist today. All Mescal and I say goodbye.